Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling a concept that's often tossed around, but maybe not always truly understood, innovation.
Hmm.
It's a word that's been, well, overused, almost a cliche, right?
Right.
But it's absolutely essential for survival in, our incredibly fast-changing world.
It really is.
So for those of you already kind of grappling with the complexities of innovation, get ready. This might reframe your entire approach. We're going to unpack some really insightful stuff from Stephen M. Shapiro's book, Mastering Innovation Through Problem Definition and Reframing.
Yeah, specifically his work on the 25 lenses. It's quite something.
Exactly, the 25 lenses that reveal hidden solutions to your most difficult problems.
Mm.
Our mission for you today is basically to cut through the noise. We want to show how true innovation isn't really about just like conjuring new ideas out of thin air.
Right.
It's about something far more fundamental,
Yeah.
defining and solving the right problems.
That's the key.
We're going to show you how asking better questions is, well, the ultimate shortcut to finding better solutions. And why understanding this could, honestly, revolutionize how you approach challenges, whether that's at work or even in your personal life.
And what's really fascinating in this source material, I think, is how it directly challenges so much of our, conventional wisdom about creativity and problem solving.
How so?
Well, it suggests that actually everyone is creative and innovative, just, in different ways. And the book really zeroes in on that often overlooked step. But it's the most crucial one in the whole innovation process.
Problem definition.
Exactly. Problem definition.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we often have these huge blind spots, right? And that's why those 25 lenses he talks about are so powerful.
Okay, let's really unpack this then. Shapiro argues innovation isn't just about novelty. It's about defining and solving important problems.
Mm-hmm.
That immediately flips the script on the usual idea that we just need, like, more ideas thrown at the wall. It also means that old saying, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions,
Yeah.
is actually, well, it's terrible advice.
It really is almost counterproductive, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you connect this to the bigger picture, it suggests the focus should be squarely on identifying better problems, meatier, more important problems that you can actually reframe.
Okay.
Only then should we even start looking for solutions. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If the problems aren't well defined, how effective can any solution really be?
That makes sense.
Albert Einstein famously said something like, if I had an hour to save the world, I'd spend 59 minutes defining the problem.
And 1 minute finding solutions.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Right. And that just hammers home the immense, often ignored value of getting that first step right.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me, and honestly, a bit mind-bending. It's the sheer power of how we frame those questions.
Oh, definitely.
The source points out that just changing a couple of words, it can completely alter our thought process. It opens up whole new avenues for solutions. Yeah, it's subtle but powerful.
It even mentions how adding just one word to a question can change people's responses, their beliefs even.
Mm-hmm. Based on those positive versus negative associations.
Right. Like the example of a health ad encouraging mattress replacement every 8 years.
Okay.
Adding for your health
Mm-hmm.
apparently makes a huge difference in how you respond emotionally. It's almost like a little psychological trick with words.
It really is, and that brings us right to the fascinating mechanics of the brain itself. Why does framing matter so much?
Yeah, why?
Well, the source explains that our brain actually operates most effectively when it has boundaries, constraints.
Really?
Yeah.
Not just blue sky thinking.
Surprisingly, no. Thinking too broadly can actually reduce the quality and relevance of the solutions you come up with. Our brains are basically wired to find order in chaos. They dislike abstraction. So a well-framed challenge actually reduces cognitive overload.
Okay, that makes sense.
However, if the questions are too specific, they can also constrict your thinking, right? You just end up with narrow, obvious answers.
Mhm.
This is where the source brings in the Goldilocks Principle.
Not too big, not too small.
Exactly,
Right.
just right. So the advice isn't really think outside the box. It's more like find a better box.
Find a better box. I like that.
Or, using Shapiro's idea, look at the challenge through one of those different lenses to get that just right perspective.
Okay, so if this process, defining the problem well, it's so critical, why do so many organizations, big ones even, seem to miss it? We see it happen again and again.
Mm-hmm.
The source gives us some powerful and frankly kind of painful history lessons.
Yeah, some stark examples.
We're talking giants like Sears. In 1983, Sears was more than 10 times the size of Walmart. Think about that. 2 out of 3 Americans shop there.
Incredible numbers.
Yet by 2018, bankruptcy.
Gone.
And Pan Am, once the world's biggest airline, gone by 91.
Yeah.
And Kodak. Kodak invented the digital camera back in the 70s.
They did. They had it first.
But they failed to really innovate with it. They just clung to their old film business, their past successes. It's almost unbelievable, isn't it? They had the tech.
It's a crucial point, and it's a pattern you see over and over. Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, profiled Circuit City.
Which is now good to gone, right?
Exactly. And Blockbuster CEO Jim Keyes famously said in 2008 something like, neither Redbox nor Netflix are even on the radar screen in terms of competition.
Wow. Famous last words.
Pretty much. 3 years later, Blockbuster declared bankruptcy.
Ouch.
Radio Shack, Toys R Us, Lehman Brothers, the list goes on. The common thread seems to be that their past success blinded them. It led to future failure because leaders believed they were just too great to be dethroned.
That is the expert blind spot, perfectly illustrated, isn't it?
Absolutely.
When you know a topic inside out, it becomes incredibly difficult to think differently about it.
Mm-hmm.
Your questions, your ideas, they're all rooted in past experience, not necessarily current realities. That's why the source emphasizes that key idea. The pace of change inside your organization needs to be faster than the pace outside.
It's a constant race.
Yeah, a race against your own outdated assumptions.
Precisely. And this leads us right into how disruption actually happens. Think about it.
Okay.
Uber and Lyft just smashed the traditional taxi industry. Airbnb completely changed the hotel landscape.
Right.
3D printing is impacting global supply chains. Blockchain is causing, well, both heartache and opportunity in financial services.
Yeah, huge shifts.
Even broad societal changes are hitting industries like tobacco, soft drinks, fast food. These disruptors often succeeded because they reframed the problems. They saw opportunities where the established players couldn't or maybe wouldn't. It's really no surprise that the World Economic Forum identifies complex problem solving as the single most important skill today.
Number one. Wow.
Number one, and creativity is number three. It all comes back to how you define that problem you're trying to solve.
This makes me wonder, though, why is it so hard for us, for people, for organizations to think differently, even when the stakes are incredibly high?
Yeah, it seems like we should be better at it.
It turns out our brains are practically wired against it. I was fascinated reading about the Harvard Implicit Association Test, the IAT.
Yes, the IAT.
It's a tool that shows our unconscious biases, right? And it shows we subconsciously associate the very word creativity with negative words.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, because newness implies uncertainty. And our brains, wired for survival, see uncertainty as dangerous.
Survival mode kicks in.
So the brain literally fights anything new. It's like a built-in resistance.
It's a really powerful evolutionary mechanism, which is great for keeping us safe, but in a rapidly changing world, it can become a huge hurdle.
Right.
This wiring means our questions often just confirm what we already believe rather than challenging our assumptions.
We look for confirmation.
Exactly. Our brains equate past experiences with safety, so change feels inherently risky. And assumptions. Well, as the source points out, they're beliefs we hold as true, oftentimes regardless of the facts.
Even if the facts disagree.
We cling to that confirmation bias. We actively ignore information that contradicts what we already think. So, to improve objectivity, to reduce failure rates, we need what the source calls a willingness to be wrong.
That takes humility.
It does, and it's critical to ask that deeper question. What are the underlying assumptions of the assumption? That's a real mind bender, but it gets to the core of it.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you listening right now? How can we actually apply this in our daily work or even personal life?
Let's make it practical.
The source gives some incredibly practical advice. First, a simple but really profound reframing. All good challenges start with, how can we? Just starting with that phrase shifts us immediately from just identifying problems to actively seeking solutions. It's a subtle verbal cue, but powerful.
It really is. And building on that, the source also pushes us to think systemically. Ask, are we improving one part of the business at the expense of other aspects?
The unintended consequences.
Right, it's like squeezing the balloon.
Wow.
You make gains in one area, but it causes deterioration somewhere else, so there's no overall improvement.
I've seen that happen.
Yeah, me too. I once spent ages optimizing one tiny process only to realize I'd created a huge bottleneck for the next team down the line.
Oops.
Exactly. Peter Drucker's wisdom fits perfectly here. There is nothing so useless as doing effectively that which should not be done at all.
So true.
And Jack Welch's point about goals is relevant too. Achievable goals, they tend to drive incremental thinking. But stretch goals, they require radical innovation. They force you to shift perspective.
That's a good point. Stretch goals force reframing. Another fascinating insight from the source is that sometimes the best way to improve an outcome is to avoid focusing directly on the outcome.
How does that work?
Well, the examples given are brilliant, like improving fall rates for the elderly. You don't just focus on preventing falls. You look at overall mobility, the environment, confidence.
Looking at the whole system.
Exactly. Or pit crews focusing on the style and flow of their movements, not just raw speed, which then unexpectedly leads to speed gains.
Interesting.
It's also vital to understand what really drives action. The source says, pain often sells better than gain.
Loss aversion.
Right. So it's crucial to ask, what is the pain we need to solve here? Or maybe what might be lost if we don't solve this problem?
That really drives home the importance of solving the actual issue, not just the surface symptoms.
Yeah.
As Will Rogers famously said, it isn't what we know that gives us trouble, it's what we know that ain't so.
Good one.
It's true, though. No matter how efficiently you solve the wrong problem, the result just won't matter.
Right.
The source also suggests exploring terrible solutions, like the polio example, preventing polio by injecting everyone with the virus. Obviously, you wouldn't do that.
Source.
But thinking about it helps break conventional thinking patterns and uncover those hidden assumptions.
Okay, as a thought experiment.
Exactly. And don't forget the power of ethnography.
That's that again?
Basically, deeply observing your customers or users in their own environment, watching how they actually behave, what they struggle with, not just what they tell you in a survey.
Seeing the unspoken needs.
That's where the real golden insights often lie.
Okay, this is great stuff. The deep dive also provides two powerful frameworks to kind of guide this whole process.
Yeah, structured approaches.
First, there's the Challenge-Centered Innovation, or CCI, framework.
Yeah. Okay.
It starts with defining your differentiator and the challenge. The key idea is innovate only where you differentiate. Don't try to fix everything.
Focus. Makes sense.
Then you set clear, objective evaluation criteria. How will you know if a solution works?
Crucial step.
Next, identify and allocate the necessary resources. Then, and this is important, look for solutions, actively seeking external perspectives, looking outside your usual area of expertise.
Get fresh eyes on it.
Exactly. And finally, experiment and execute.
Yeah.
Build small, scalable experiments to test your hypothesis before you go all in.
Learn fast, fail cheap.
Right.
And then there's the other one, the concise, fast innovation framework. It really distills the essence.
Fast. Okay, what's that?
F is for focus. Focus on those differentiators. You just can't solve every problem. Like the source says, if you try to be great at everything, you'll be great at nothing.
Prioritize.
Focus where you'll have the biggest positive impact. A is for ask. Ask better questions. Dig deep for those opportunities. This is the core of everything we've talked about.
Questioning.
S is for shift. Shift your perspectives. Reframe the problem to find those breakthrough solutions. This is where those 25 lenses come in super handy, giving you different angles.
Find a better box.
Find a better box. And T is for test. Test your ideas to validate or refute them, reduce the risk, and then implement the solutions that work. It's all about learning quickly and adapting.
Focus, ask, shift, test, fast. I like that. It's memorable.
It is very practical.
Wow. What an incredible deep dive this has been.
Yeah, lots to think about.
Today, we've really learned that innovation isn't just about, random new ideas popping up.
No, it's much more rigorous.
It's about rigorously defining and then reframing the most important problems first. We've seen how just simple changes in the questions we ask can unlock entirely new possibilities. We've understood why our brains often resist this very process, why change feels hard.
The survival instinct.
And we've seen how even the biggest industry giants can fall if they just cling too tightly to old assumptions. It's a humbling lesson, but also really empowering, I think.
Absolutely. We've walked through those crucial steps of effective problem definition. From understanding the brain's Goldilocks Principle.
Right. Not too big, not too small.
To applying these powerful frameworks like CCI and fast innovation.
Yeah.
The core takeaway, really, is that true progress comes from challenging our assumptions. embracing curiosity and having that willingness to be wrong sometimes. It's definitely a shift in mindset as much as it is following a process.
So, as you go about your week, we really encourage you. Pause. Before you dive into solutions, just pause.
Take that moment.
Before you tackle that next challenge at work, or maybe even a personal dilemma, take a breath. Consider this. What problem are you really trying to solve deep down? And could a simple shift in how you ask that question, maybe looking at it through a different lens, could that lead you to a far more profound, more impactful solution than you ever imagined?